A Ferrari goes missing. A maid is accused. But when the truth behind her crime is revealed, the world has to ask, who is really guilty, the mother or the system that failed her? Before we dive in, family, make sure you subscribe to Black Journey and hit that bell because I share powerful new stories with you every single day. Now sit back, relax, and let me take you into this amazing story you don't want to miss. The city of Atlanta was alive with neon light, but for Aisha Johnson, the world felt dim. Her hands ached from endless scrubbing. The marble tiles of the billionaire's mansion reflected back not her face, but the exhaustion of her life. She was 32, dark-skinned, proud, and carrying the quiet weight of survival. To the world, she was a maid. To herself, she was a mother fighting every day for her daughter's life. Nia, her 9-year-old, lay in a hospital bed across town, a child far too young to know the word leukemia. The doctors spoke of treatments, of chances, of numbers, written like destiny on whiteboards Aisha couldn't erase. They spoke of money, figures so cruelly high that each syllable stabbed her dignity. Insurance had covered the first months. But now, the bills stacked like bricks sealing her hope away. Aisha never begged. She was raised on pride, taught by her grandmother that dignity was the last currency nobody could steal. But as Nia's chest rose weakly under the oxygen tube, as her smile flickered in exhaustion, Aisha felt dignity crumbling like old paper. She worked in the mansion of Daniel Carrington, a billionaire who owned half the city's skyline. He was the kind of man the news called self-made, though his empire was built on family wealth and ruthless ambition. A man who never glanced twice at the people polishing his marble floors. To him, Aisha was invisible, but she saw everything. The endless parties, champagne poured like water, cars gleaming under spotlights, each one worth more than her lifetime of wages. She saw the red Ferrari, parked in the driveway as if it were just another ornament in a house already swollen with luxury. That car, sleek, flawless, powerful, became a symbol in her mind. Not of envy, but of possibility. She thought of Nia's frail arms, the machines keeping her alive, and her heart broke with a question. What would she trade for one chance? To save her child? The answer was everything. On a Tuesday evening, after polishing Carrington's library until the floor shone like glass, Aisha's phone buzzed. It was the hospital. The voice on the other end was kind, but firm. Ma'am, unless we receive a payment by tomorrow, we cannot continue the treatment. The room tilted. Aisha leaned against the shelf of books she would never have time to read. Tomorrow. That word echoed like a verdict. She left the mansion with her thoughts heavy, her chest aching. Outside, the Ferrari glowed beneath the floodlights, crimson as a warning, beautiful as a dream. The guardhouse was empty. The staff trusted her comings and goings. And in that fragile moment, something inside Aisha shifted. It wasn't a decision born of crime. It was born of desperation. She wasn't stealing for greed. She was stealing for a life. She whispered into the night, as if speaking to her grandmother's spirit. Forgive me. I have no choice. Her hand trembled as she slipped into the Ferrari. The leather swallowed her like a throne she didn't belong in. Her heart raced. Fear, guilt, adrenaline. But above all, the image of Nia kept her steady. She turned the key. The engine roared to life, a beast awakened. She drove through Atlanta's midnight streets, her reflection flickering in glass towers. The car, untouchable to most, was now her desperate chariot. She reached the hospital, parked recklessly, and begged the administrators, "Take it. Sell it. Do whatever you must, just let my daughter live." The staff stared in shock. Some saw a thief. Others saw a mother's breaking point. Security was called. Police arrived. Aisha stood trembling, her hands raised not in surrender to crime, but in surrender to a world that had cornered her. And then came Carrington. He walked into the hospital lobby like a storm, his tailored suit sharp under the harsh fluorescent lights. The billionaire whose name adorned skyscrapers now stared at the woman who cleaned his floors, and at his Ferrari parked crookedly outside the ER entrance. Aisha's voice cracked as she tried to explain. She's my daughter. Please. I'll do anything. She needs treatment. They said tomorrow is the last chance. I had no one else to turn to." Her eyes glistened, her pride breaking open in front of the man who represented everything she despised about wealth. Carrington's face hardened. The police waited for his word. In that instant, Aisha's entire future balanced on his decision. Would he press charges and destroy her completely? Or would he see, perhaps for the first time, the humanity behind the hands that scrubbed his mansion clean? And then, something unexpected flickered across his expression. Not anger, not outrage, but something more dangerous. Curiosity. The billionaire stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You think stealing from me is the way to save her?" Aisha, her voice barely a whisper, replied, "I don't think. I know it's wrong. But tell me, if it was your child, would you have done anything less?" The lobby fell silent. Time itself seemed to stop. In that silence, Aisha realized that her act of desperation had become something more than theft. It had forced a man of untouchable wealth to confront a truth he never considered, that survival for some was not about power or status, but about love so fierce it defied every law written by the privileged. The story was no longer about a Ferrari. It was about two worlds colliding, the billionaire who had everything and the maid who had nothing but a reason to fight, and the reaction Carrington gave next would change both their lives forever. The police officers waited like statues, their pens hovering over notepads, eager to write the next chapter of a poor black maid turned criminal. To them, it was simple, grand theft auto. But to Aisha, standing in the glare of the hospital lobby, lights, it was a mother's cry carved into desperation. Daniel Carrington, billionaire and master of his own universe, stood tall, his eyes fixed on her. For the first time, he wasn't looking through her, he was looking at her. And that unnerved her more than his wealth, more than the police, more than the threat of prison. "You risked everything," he said, his voice calm but sharp, "for a treatment you couldn't afford." Aisha clenched her trembling hands. She felt the eyes of the hospital staff pressing against her like judgment. "I risked nothing," she whispered. "What is dignity if my child doesn't live to see tomorrow? What is freedom if she's buried before she's grown?" Carrington's jaw tightened. He was a man accustomed to negotiations, boardrooms, contracts worth billions. But here was a woman negotiating with something he couldn't quantify: love. He looked at her, then at the Ferrari parked outside under red and blue flashing lights. The car was worth nearly $500,000, an indulgence he rarely drove. He turned back to her, his eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea what prison would do to your daughter? She would lose you before the illness ever could." Her throat tightened. "Then let me lose myself trying to save her, instead of watching her fade away while I do nothing." The word struck him harder than he expected. Something in his chest shifted, a memory he had buried long ago. For just a moment, Carrington saw not a thief, but a reflection of someone he used to know. His own mother, years ago, working double shifts, fighting to protect him from a father's cruelty before wealth insulated him from hardship. One of the officers stepped forward. "Mr. Carrington, should we take her in?" The entire room froze, the question hanging heavy. This was the moment. A single word could destroy Aisha's life, or save it. Carrington inhaled slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "No," the officer blinked. "Sir?" Carrington's voice was steady, authoritative. "There will be no charges." Gasps rippled through the lobby. Aisha's knees nearly buckled. Relief washed over her like a flood, but it was tangled with disbelief. She expected fury, punishment, ruin. Instead, he had stayed her execution with a word. But he wasn't finished. "Everyone here, out," Carrington ordered, his voice slicing through the silence. "I'll handle this." The officers exchanged looks, hesitant, but Carrington's reputation carried more weight than their hesitation. Slowly they dispersed, leaving the billionaire and the maid standing in the fluorescent glow. Aisha lifted, her eyes struggling to find her voice. Why? Why would you do this? Carrington studied her, his expression unreadable. Because I see a mother, not a criminal. But make no mistake, Aisha. You shook something in me tonight. And I don't know if I admire it, or if it terrifies me. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to thank him, to beg further. But pride held her tongue. She had already lost enough dignity. Carrington gestured toward the corridor. Take me to her. Her heart skipped. To Nia? Yes, he said firmly. If I am to understand why you risked everything, I want to see the reason with my own eyes. They walked together through the sterile hallways, the billionaire's polished shoes echoing against tiles, Aisha's weary steps beside him. Nurses glanced curiously. What was Daniel Carrington, the untouchable mogul, doing beside a maid? But no one dared to question. When they entered Nia's room, the world fell quiet. The child lay small and fragile against white sheets, her skin pale, her hair thin from chemotherapy. Machines beeped softly, keeping rhythm with the fragile thread of her life. Carrington stopped at the doorway, something raw flickering in his gaze. For a moment, the empire he built, the towers he owned, the billions in his account, all of it felt hollow. None of it could compete with the sight of a mother standing guard over her child's fading light. Nia stirred, her eyes opening weakly. "Mama?" she whispered. Aisha rushed forward, taking her tiny hand. "I'm here, baby. I'm always here." Nia's eyes drifted toward Carrington. She didn't recognize him, but children sense things adults miss. "Who's that man?" Carrington's throat tightened. For the first time in decades, he felt words falter. He stepped closer, his voice softer than Aisha had ever heard it. Just someone who wanted to meet the bravest girl in this hospital. Nia managed the faintest smile, then drifted back into sleep. Silence lingered. Aisha turned. To Carrington, her voice low but edged with fire. "Do you see now? She's all I have. So if I broke your laws, if I risked prison, it's because the world gave me no other choice. People like me don't have a safety net. People like me don't have second chances." Carrington stood in the dim light, his face unreadable. But inside, the fortress of his indifference began to crack. He thought of his own mother again, the sacrifices she made before he rose above it all. He thought of the countless employees in his empire, invisible faces he never acknowledged. And here was one of them, forcing him to confront the humanity he had chosen to ignore. He spoke quietly. "What if I gave her that chance?" Aisha blinked. "What do you mean?" Carrington looked at Nia, then back at Aisha. "What if I paid for her treatment, every bill, every procedure, until she's healed?" The words landed like thunder. Aisha's breath caught. She wanted to scream yes, to fall at his feet, to weep with gratitude. But suspicion rose alongside hope. People like Carrington didn't give without reason. "Why?" she asked, voice sharp. "Why would a man like you care about a maid's child?" Carrington's eyes darkened. "Because once I was the child nobody cared about. And I know what it means to be saved. Or to be abandoned." Aisha's tears fell freely now. Hot against her cheeks, she whispered, "If you do this, Mr. Carrington, you won't just save her, you'll save me." He nodded once firmly. "Then it's decided. Tomorrow, the hospital will receive everything they need." The room fell still. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in Aisha's heart. Not fragile, not desperate, but real. Yet even as relief washed over her, she couldn't shake a truth. This was no fairy tale. Carrington's generosity came with weight, with expectation. Their worlds had collided, and nothing would be simple again. Because when the powerful decide to step into the lives of the powerless, the story never ends with charity. It begins with consequences, and Aisha, though grateful, knew she was stepping into a storm she could not yet see. The news spread faster than either of them could imagine. By dawn, Whispers had leaked from the hospital. A billionaire's Ferrari stolen by his maid, not for greed, but for her sick daughter. Headlines ignited. Maid risks prison for child's life. Carrington spares thief in shocking twist. Reporters swarmed outside the hospital, cameras flashing, hungry for scandal wrapped in sentiment. Aisha wanted to vanish. She had spent her life working quietly, unseen, enduring the invisibility society handed her. Now, suddenly she was a spectacle. Some praised her as a mother's warrior, others mocked her as reckless. And beneath it all, the cruel voices whispered about race, about class, about how a black maid's desperation made her the perfect target for judgment. In the hospital cafeteria, whispers followed her every step. "That's her," strangers muttered, "the one who stole the Ferrari." Some faces carried admiration, others sneered. But Aisha wasn't thinking of them. She was thinking of Nia, sleeping peacefully for once, and of the deal Carrington had struck with destiny. The hospital had already confirmed. The billionaire's money had arrived. Every treatment, every procedure was now covered. For the first time, Aisha's chest didn't feel crushed by debt, yet peace was elusive. Because mercy from the powerful always came with a shadow. That shadow arrived in the form of Carrington himself. He visited the hospital the next day, striding past cameras and journalists with his usual command. When he entered Nia's room, Aisha felt her pulse quicken. Gratitude and suspicion wrestled inside her. "She looks stronger already," he said softly, glancing at the child. "She will be," Aisha replied, her voice firm, protective. She would not let him mistake gratitude for submission. Carrington studied her, reading the unspoken defiance. "You don't trust me," he observed. Aisha met his gaze, her chin raised. "Men like you don't give without wanting something. In return, I've cleaned your house long enough to know generosity isn't your habit." For a moment his lips curved into the faintest smile, not of amusement but of respect. "You're sharper than most. That's why I'm here. I don't want anything from you, Aisha, but I do want something for you." Her brow furrowed. "For me?" "Yes." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You risked everything for your daughter. That kind of courage, it shouldn't be wasted on scrubbing floors." The words unsettled her. They were meant as praise, but they pricked at her pride. "Work is work. Cleaning floors puts food on the table. There is no shame in it." "I didn't say there was shame," Carrington replied calmly. "But tell me, do you want to spend the rest of your life invisible? Or do you want to stand where people cannot ignore you?" His question lingered long after he left. Days turned into weeks. Nia responded well to treatment, her cheeks gaining color, her laughter returning in small bursts. Hope seeped into Aisha's heart like morning light through blinds. But outside the hospital walls, the storm grew. Journalists hounded her, tabloids painted her either as a saint or a criminal, and activists began using her name as a symbol of systemic injustice. Hashtags spread across social media. "Justice for Aisha," "Ferrari mother, your dignity, over wealth, dar." Strangers sent letters, donations, and prayers. Others hurled insults, calling her ungrateful, reckless, or worse. Aisha stayed quiet. She refused interviews, refused the cameras. Her only focus was Nia. But silence could not shield her from becoming a symbol. And symbols are heavy to carry. One evening, Carrington appeared again, this time without security, without fanfare. He found Aisha sitting alone by the hospital window, staring out at the city lights. "You hate the attention," he said softly. "I hate being used," she replied. "First by a world that made me choose between crime and my child. Now by strangers who want to turn my pain into a slogan." Carrington nodded, understanding more than she expected. "The world loves stories like yours. They feed on them until there's nothing left of the person living it." Her eyes narrowed. "Then why are you here, Mr. Carrington? Are you feeding too?" His silence stretched. Then, carefully, he spoke. I see myself in you more than you realize. I was raised by a woman who fought for me with everything she had. She worked herself to the bone and still it wasn't enough. When I was old enough, I swore I'd never let poverty dictate my life again. But I lost her before I could give her the peace she deserved. I see in you what I lost. The confession disarmed her. For the first time, he wasn't the billionaire, the untouchable mogul. He was just a son mourning his mother. Aisha's voice softened. And you think helping me makes up for losing her? No, he admitted. Nothing could. But maybe it can keep me from forgetting what matters. For a moment, they sat in silence, two lives stitched together by pain, pride, and memory. But the world outside was not silent. The media began to question Carrington's motives. Was this charity? Or was he grooming a narrative to polish his public image? Was Aisha his latest project, or something else entirely? Speculation ran wild. At the hospital, reporters shouted questions whenever she stepped outside. Are you in a relationship with Mr. Carrington? Is he buying your loyalty? Every word was a blade against her dignity. One night, after tucking Nia into sleep, Aisha found herself pacing the hospital corridor. Anger burned in her chest. She was grateful, yes, but she refused to be anyone's puppet. When Carrington arrived again, she confronted him directly. Enough, she said firmly, her voice shaking but strong. I don't want cameras. I don't want to be your symbol. I don't want my daughter growing up thinking she survived because a billionaire took pity on us. I want her to believe she lived because her mother fought. Carrington studied her, his gaze unwavering. Then, slowly, he nodded. Then fight, and I'll stand behind you, not in front of you. His words surprised her. They were not domineering, not possessive. They were supportive. And for the first time, Aisha wondered if this man, the one whose world had collided with hers in the unlikeliest way, was capable of something she had long stopped believing in from people of his kind. Respect. But respect did not erase the storm brewing outside. It only prepared her for the hardest chapter yet. Because while Nia's health improved, the world demanded answers. And the weight of mercy was about to become heavier than Aisha ever imagined. The storm reached its peak. By the time Nia's treatment entered its final stage, Aisha's name had become more than a whisper. Talk shows dissected her every move. Commentators argued whether she was a hero or a criminal spared by privilege. Protesters marched, carrying signs that read, "Healthcare is a right, and no mother should have to steal." Aisha hated it. She never wanted to be famous. She only wanted her daughter alive. But the world had made her story into a mirror, reflecting injustice back at those who preferred not to see it. Carrington, too, felt the pressure. Business associates questioned his judgment. Investors worried about his reputation. "You're risking everything for a maid," one of them sneered during a board meeting. Carrington silenced them with a glare. "She's not a maid," he said. "She's a mother. And if you can't see that, you've forgotten what it means to be human." Still, the whispers gnawed at him. He had built his empire on control, yet here was one woman, poor, black, unpolished, forcing him into chaos. And strangely, he didn't resent it. He almost welcomed it. But Aisha refused to let his mercy define her. When a journalist cornered her outside the hospital asking, "Do you think Carrington saved your daughter's life?" Aisha paused, then spoke with steady fire. "No, my daughter's life is not owed to any man. She lives because I refused to give up. She lives because I fought. He helped, yes, but don't you dare forget who carried her, who prayed for her, who bled for her. That was me." The clip went viral, overnight. Millions watched as a maid, once invisible, declared her dignity to the world. Carrington saw it too. And though part of him bristled at being diminished, another part, the part buried beneath years of wealth and armor, felt pride. She wasn't his project. She was her own force. Weeks later, Nia was discharged. Her little legs, still shaky, carried her out of the hospital into sunlight. Aisha held her hand tightly, tears streaming as reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. She ignored them all, focused only on the warmth of her daughter's fingers. But peace was short-lived. That evening, a letter arrived. It was from the hospital administrator, a bill for remaining ancillary costs not covered by Carrington's donation. A cruel reminder that even miracles come with fine print. Aisha's stomach dropped. She had no money. Not even enough to cover a fraction. For the first time since her daughter's recovery, despair threatened to return. She went to Carrington's mansion, not to beg, but to speak her truth. He greeted her in his study, surrounded by polished wood and glass walls overlooking the skyline. "I got a bill," she said, holding the paper in her hand. Her voice was calm, steady, but her eyes burned. "I won't come here asking you for more, but I need you to understand. This system you thrive in, it doesn't just crush people like me, it kills us. And unless men like you change it, there will be thousands more Aishas, thousands more Nias." Carrington looked at her long and hard. For years, he had measured success in numbers, profits, buildings that bore his name. But this woman measured it in lives, in dignity, and in her words, he saw the cracks in the empire he thought was flawless. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I've built walls so high I forgot who lives in their shadows." She stepped closer, her pride sharp as glass. "Then tear them down. Use your billions for something more than cars you don't drive. Don't save me, save the next mother who can't steal a Ferrari." Silence stretched between them. And then, for the first time, Carrington didn't just feel curiosity or respect, he felt responsibility. The next week, he announced the creation of the Nia Foundation, named after her daughter, a $1 billion initiative to fund medical care for children from low-income families, ensuring no mother would ever face Aisha's choice again. The media roared. Some called it charity, others strategy. But Aisha knew the truth. It wasn't pity. It wasn't PR. It was change, born from collision. When reporters asked for her reaction, she stood tall, Nia at her side. "This isn't about me," she said. "This isn't about Mr. Carrington. This is about justice, about dignity, about mothers and fathers who should never have to choose between crime and their child's breath. If my pain became the spark, then let it burn until the system changes." Crowd erupted in applause. For the first time, Aisha felt not invisible, not a symbol, but seen, as a woman, as a fighter, as a mother whose dignity had not been destroyed, but reborn. That night, she tucked Nia into bed in their small apartment, the glow of city lights spilling through the window. The little girl whispered, "Mama, are you happy?" Aisha kissed her forehead. "I'm proud," she said. Outside, Carrington sat alone in his penthouse watching the news coverage of the foundation he had created. His face reflected in the glass, but for once, he didn't see a billionaire. He saw a man reminded of his humanity by the courage of a woman the world called a maid. Their worlds had collided in the unlikeliest way, but from the wreckage came something neither expected: dignity for her, redemption for him, and hope for countless others. And though their lives would never fully intertwine, both carried forward the lesson born that night in a hospital lobby, that true wealth is not measured in cars or towers, but in the lives saved when love refuses to surrender. Family, remember this. True wealth isn't about money. It's about love, dignity, and the fight to protect what matters. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Black Journey for more powerful stories. Stay strong, stay proud, and never forget you matter.